Welcome to another episode here at Big Man in the Woods. My name is Mark, your online scout leader, helping you deliver more practical skills and skills for life. Now, it's another lockdown interview. An awesome guest today, Scouter Ken. Now, you probably don't recognize his face, but the moment he speaks, if you're an avid podcaster and you love listening to podcasts all about scouting, you probably listen to Scouter Ken's podcast. But I think, Scouter Ken, you should introduce your podcast.
Well, all right. So yeah, my podcast is called Scouting Stuff You Should Know, or I tend to kind of just go by Scouting Stuff these days. We can get into why I chose that title. It is related to stuff you should know, but not directly so. But that's not important right now. I tend to just call it Scouting Stuff these days because that's a little bit easier. It rolls off the tongue a little bit better.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it disassociates us a little bit from stuff you should know. So.
Yeah, cool. So Scouter Ken, let's tell us a little bit about yourself, where in the world you are, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I am a former scout and now scouter in I don't live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada anymore, but I live quite near there. So I still think of that as, sort of home and where I'm based out of. And so that's pretty much all of that, that's the where and the who. Yeah, I've been a scout here since I was like 5.
So you've done the whole journey all the way up.
Beavers through rovers. I aged out in 2007 and then came back when my kids went into beavers.
Oh man, that's awesome. So podcast wise, I've known you for some time now, listening to your podcast, and it's cool because it is quite a lot of scouting about Canada, but you talk about topics around the world, and you get different stories and bits and pieces and stuff. So it's just not about scouting in Canada, is it? Or am I wrong?
No, not exclusively. I mean, like the tagline that I put on Twitter is, all you need to know about scouting in Canada and occasionally other places in the world. And that's a bit of a mouthful. I got to figure out a shorter way to say that. But yeah, we can't really help but having a sort of Canadian bent to any of the content, because both myself and my main co-host Colin are lifelong members of Scouts Canada, and definitely Canada based, both in terms of, not only our scouting experience, but then also, our continued involvement with scouting. It's all Canadian. And so, yeah, we can't really help that there is a Canadian slant to a lot of the content that we put out. But where possible, we do try and either tie it into happenings elsewhere, or we try and generalize our commentary enough that it could be applicable to just about anybody, hopefully just about anybody who is approaching scouting around the world.
So how old is the podcast?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually have lost track. I think I registered the domain in late 2015, but so I guess we're coming up on 5 years.
Excellent. And how many episodes?
That is also tricky because, of course, at some point, I struggle to find time to record. So at some point, So at some point, there's been a few spans during our arc where I haven't been able to publish episodes on a consistent schedule. But so I think in terms of like the numbered episodes, we're just crested 100 now. But then a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago now, I started doing these little sort of, I call them Scouting 5, based on the Scouters 5 concept. And they're basically just weekly-ish summaries of some of the more interesting news stories I find, again, from around the world, just pertaining to scouting.
Yeah.
So I think overall, there's maybe 160 or 170 episodes.
Good number.
But, yeah.
That's awesome. So you said it was just not you, it's Scouter Colin helps you about doing the podcast as well. And listening, I know you're not in the same room. Yours other places of Canada or the other side of the world. Sometimes you're traveling with business and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess it depends. I mean, especially now, Colin and I aren't in the same room, because there's kind of a health crisis going on. But yeah, I was already set up to do all that sort of remote recording because, like you say, I do travel a lot for work. And, one of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing when I travel is, trying to reach out to scout groups in the areas that I go to. Again, that's something else that has fallen by the wayside given the current situation. But in a normal year, yeah, I would visit a handful of different places, often in the US, sometimes further abroad than that. And, like I say, I'll reach out to scout groups in the area, try and touch base with them, see if I can get out to a few activities. They usually like having visitors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like it's not a big deal for me to Colin and I record in person when we're able, right?
Yeah.
Got the microphone set up, and I mean, we can record just about anywhere, a couch in a basement or a table on a restaurant
In
patio
a restaurant,
somewhere.
I remember the restaurant then.
Yeah, that was where the teacher crashed us. That was hilarious. Um, but it's just as easy to do recording remotely, right? There's
Yeah.
lots of tech now for that. I mean, we're using one right now, right? So,
Yeah, no, it's the beauty of technology, isn't it? And who would have ever thought, a year ago that we'll be doing all our scouts virtually all online? Was that, as someone who's very techy, was that something you've ever planned on doing then?
um, it wasn't something, well, yes and no. Like, I mean, I've always wanted to, and Scouts Canada has been emphasizing the inclusion of a STEM component. And I've always kind of wanted to play that up a little bit. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like it's there even in like the questions that we have to ask when we're onboarding a new scouter, that the tension is set up from the get-go between scouting and um, just the inundation with technology that most youth experience today, right?
Hmm.
And so we still, for the most part, do kind of try and emphasize that normal participation in scouting will tend to involve getting away from the screen. Um, that said, things like Jota Joti, I usually try and make sure that I have at least a few youth come out to that.
Yeah.
Really try and sell them on that. And then at least once a year, I will do some kind of coding activity with the Cub Scouts because, like as not, it gets really, really cold where we are. And yes, be prepared, and yes, dress for the weather. But at -40, we're meeting inside. um, and so I'll usually try and do some kind of coding event through the winter, um, and try and incorporate STEM subjects and especially like technology focused subjects because that
Yeah.
is certainly an area of comfort for me um, where I can. But in terms of like was this with all this virtual scouting, was this something that I was really like, oh my gosh, like I can't wait for? No, this was not something that I was like chomping at the bit for. That said, being as connected to the scouting communities online that I am, or as I am, um, I kind of saw this coming a little bit
Mhm.
because, of
Yeah.
course, Europe got hit before Canada did. And so scouting organizations, Malta and other countries, shut down in person meetings well ahead of when that happened here in Canada, which means that, which meant that by the time that it happened here in Canada too, I'd already collected copious notes and I could basically hit the ground running with my group, right? And be just like, okay, well,
Mhm.
you know what? We're all locked up at home, but like here's a whole raft of activities that we can do, and here's some technology we can leverage to continue meeting virtually, and it was nice to be able to do that for the group,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then to kind of run that tech back end to make sure that all of our Zoom meetings were going smoothly, or getting us on board with G Suite, because apparently there's like a grant that we were able to access through our scouting council to get G Suite for free for our group, so we
Uh,
could drop Zoom and go to Google Meet and get access to all
mhm.
that other stuff.
Yeah.
So that was good. Um, but yeah, it wasn't ever something that I was like desirous of.
Yeah. No. No. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But do you think we could continue doing some version of online scouting?
Well, I would like to. And unfortunately, or well, yeah, unfortunately in this, I'm a little bit at odds, not so much with other scouters, but with the parents. Um, a lot of the parents in our group, unlike in, and it kind of, if I have anything that kind of bugs me with all of this, is that I've helped other groups, because again, like I built up lots of notes, and so when literally all of North America scouting in North America, basically just about everywhere, stopped in mid-March.
Yep.
And at least for the in-person stuff. But I was able to reach out, because like I say, I travel, I make contacts with other groups. And so I was able to reach out to some of those other groups and be just like, hey, like, are you, are you shut down too? They're like, yeah, we are. Not really sure how to go about it. And I was able to say, here, take my notes, run with it.
Hmm.
And some of them really did. And like, it's been great to see that happen, but I haven't had the same success within my own group, which is unfortunate. Um, and there's been sort of a lot of our parents have expressed um, a desire to not have too much
Screen time.
too much screen time for their kids, too much technology time for their kids with scouting, when of course they're already having to do so much through school, right?
Cool.
I mean, now in the summer that equation changes a little bit, but that was, one of the big pieces of feedback we got was like, well, my kids are already doing like, a few hours on the screen a day for their school anyways, so I don't really want them doing more hours on a screen at night for scouting, which, I mean, fair, I do understand. Um, so I don't know. I would like to see some kind of, because like as not, I know with Scouts Canada, they've like we'll be able, hopefully, to return to in person in fall. It's going to be outdoors only
Hmm.
for at least the rest of 2020,
Okay.
and we'll see what January holds. Um, so I would like to be able to to have virtual meetings as kind of an option, right? Whether that's because it's blistering cold outside as we get into December, or even just because there's other logistical limits they're imposing on us, right? We can't have more than 15 youth meeting in a place at a time,
Yep.
um, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if our registration, and I expect our registration numbers will go down, but like I know we're going to have a lot of uptake from Cubs into Scouts as well,
Hmm.
people who are looking to return. And we've done a few little sort of initial surveys to see who's coming back and who isn't. And so we could wind up in a situation where, we have more youth in, say, a scout troop than technically can meet at a single troop activity, in which case, of course, we would have to split between activities. And we've gotten pretty good at scheduling those sorts of things. In fact, that's kind of been our bread and butter for like, if we want to do, because the archery ranges here can only accommodate so many people at a time, and the climbing walls,
Very
uh,
easy.
same thing. So we'll just, schedule the archery range for like 3 weeks and then the climbing wall for 3 weeks, and like maybe line up 3 weeks at the food bank or something, and then we'll just rotate patrols through each of those activities,
Yep.
right? So kind of just mix and match as we need to. Um, so everybody gets to do everything. It just plays out over 3 weeks. So we're good at that kind of scheduling, but I figure that virtual meetings are probably going to have to be a part of that. Um, and I have some ideas about how they could be used, right? Like I don't know if we're necessarily going to have if we use them necessarily in the same way that we have been, where like we're doing, we're still trying to have like a full meetings program. My idea for virtual meetings is almost more like, well, I was reading a book by Kent Julian, and um, shoot, the title eludes me, but it was basically like 99 ideas for people who want to grow youth ministry. Now, Julian himself, like he's a youth pastor, so he was writing the book within the context of, establishing ministry teams at churches.
Mhm.
But a lot of the 99 thoughts for leading volunteers or something like that. Um, but a lot of what he was writing, I found to be applicable in other contexts. And one point that he made, I think it was his 23rd idea, um, was that, especially if you want to be running a program year round, build breaks in, right? So he's like, we'll build like a topical stream. We'll do 3 or 4 meetings on a particular topic or with a particular focus. And then we'll just take a week, take a week. Nobody has to show up. Everybody gets kind of a break and a relax, and they come back refreshed and ready for more, right?
Yep.
And then we can go to our next topical stream. And that's maybe somewhere I would like to see us go with how we deliver program to the youth in this new reality.
Mhm.
Um, because I think it could work. Like that I think would really give us the opportunity to leverage virtual scouting well, because yeah, we can schedule different in-person activities, but then we can just have an off week where, nobody needs to get together, and maybe at most, if there's one or two scouters willing to do it, we could just have an informal join if you want Google Meet set up, and
Yeah,
we could like talk about badges or
or whatever. Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So instead of being virtual with a webcam and stuff, have you not thought about doing what scouting stuff does, a podcast version?
Well, yes. Sorry, just need my water here. Off screen. Yes, and I haven't had all of those discussions yet. We do actually. So for my daughter's scout troop, there is a Discord server that has been set up, but we haven't necessarily brought everybody into it, just because there's a there's a moderation concern, right? You know, it's on the one hand, if we as scouters are going to be encouraging the youth to join a Discord server for specifically for use in a scouting context, it does kind of behoove us as scouters to have a sort of supervisory eye in that
Yep.
Discord channel. But then, of course, considerations of too deep apply, and we're still ironing out some of the logistics there. So we may go that route too. That may be something we roll out in the fall. But for now, we haven't really touched on it. And again, I use Discord actually for recording podcasts all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there could be an option to do just audio meetings via Discord or things like that. But again, it's making sure that we have myself, or at least any two scouters who have the time to log in and be in channel while the youth are doing their own thing, also in channel. So challenges.
Yeah, lots of challenges everywhere, Scout again. It's it's not easy. And I think the good thing is that all the scouts around the world are all having exactly the same challenges. And it's interesting just talking to different people how they're doing scouting in different ways. But it seems that everyone's doing it more or less the same way.
Yeah.
It's real.
Well, I mean, all these different technologies exist, but especially once you get into considerations like making sure that you have the too deep, and making sure that you can create these environments where the youth can run the show, but in a way that is still supervised. That eliminates some technology right off the bat, and sort of tends to kind of funnel everybody towards particular technical solutions as they present themselves. Zoom solved so many problems for educators, for business people, for scout groups, and to Zoom's credit, they were able to scale very quickly. That said, like we dropped the use of Zoom, we went over to Google Meet, just because like the G Suite platform is overall more comprehensive, and I think that maybe is we talk a lot, of course, about how do we continue meeting in these circumstances, and that is important. But the other thing that kind of came to the fore was that like this is an opportunity, and I think I talked about this in one episode or another. This is an opportunity for the group itself to pause and catch its breath and sort of organize itself around a particular technological solution. Which is one of the reasons that I went with G Suite, because it was kind of, we were using Zoom, we'd had a few meetings, and then just doing a little bit of research, and someone had pointed it out to me, a friend pointed it out to me, another scouter. He's like, hey, you should contact the council because they have this partnership where you can get like G Suite for free. Like, oh, I got to check that out. But then this was good, right? Because even our group, we use different solutions, right? Disparate technical solutions. There's some free software from Salesforce, and occasionally just like Microsoft Office. And so we use all these disparate technical solutions to maintain documentation and communicate with each other and blah, blah, blah. Being able to take this time to onboard one technical solution that covers all those bases,
Well,
like
yeah.
this was a really great opportunity for that. And so it's like, well, shoot, I better take this opportunity while it's here because
Yeah.
it's going to get only busier from here. And so we're still in the middle of like migrating everything onto G Suite, but
Yeah.
I think that's going to wind up just being a very positive move for the group, for a bunch of different reasons, right? Like, instead of having a series of Gmail addresses that are like, group commissioner at and group treasurer at,
Yeah.
now it's, now we have a domain name for the group, and we can have treasurer at the group, commissioner at the group.
Yeah.
And there's the ability to just hand those accounts over to new individuals, right? If one person steps down as commissioner, then we go in, we reset the password for that account, hand the new password to the new commissioner, and away they go. But they still have access to all the messages, they have access to all the documents,
Yeah.
and there's that ability for continuity there. So I think this is a good time for groups to sort of just find ways to reorganize themselves and make
Yeah.
managing all of the behind the scenes stuff that is necessary for a group to run well. This is a good time for that.
And yeah, but it's people who are scared of technology, though, isn't it? That's
Mm.
the other thing, isn't it?
Surely you're not suggesting that there's a whole cohort of scouters who are somewhat anachronistic and disdainful of, of modern
Good way of
technology.
describing them. Good way. Good way. But it's true, though. I know lots of scouters in the district where I am very afraid of doing Zoom and sitting in front of the camera and talking stuff like that. But it is what it is, isn't it? And
Mhm.
some people want to do it and some people don't. I think you just have to accept that some people don't feel comfortable with technology, and that's the way
Yep.
it's going to be.
At the same time, we are scouts and we are wise in the use of all resources.
Well done. So, Scalacan, let's talk. Get back to podcasting. What's the next episode all about?
You know what? That's a really good question. Colin and I were actually supposed to record on last week, and it just fell through. I'm tossing around 3, and I'm not quite sure which one we're going to pick because it's 1 light subject and 2 very heavy subjects. So one of the heavier subjects is, of course, the Baden Powell statue. Scouting Radio very generously let me run their episode about Baden Powell and his history and his views, which is really great. I was very grateful to Justin for letting me do that. And I still wanted to have that discussion with Colin. We still want to have that conversation at some point. So that's one of the heavier subjects. The lighter subject is just sort of another loop back on the plan for returning to scouting, because of course Scouts Canada has issued additional guidance and what that might look like. And of course now we've also started to see some stuff come out of other countries, right? Like I know in the UK, there were a few beaver colonies that just recently that were able to meet in person again for various outdoor activities.
Yeah, so in England, but now in England has been chopped down into smaller pieces. So there's towns and cities in England that have now been, we call it the red light system. So they've stopped all activities because
Right.
they've had a peak in the COVID. So they're not allowed to meet face to face. But the majority of England now, we can meet outside. Like you were talking about earlier on, with a maximum of 15 people, and that includes the leaders and stuff like that. But there's a lot of risk assessments. You've got to have toilets and some other extra bits. So it's a lot of work. And some scouters are just saying, you know what, it's too much at the moment for all these extra bits, plus working and family life. So a lot of scouts are just step back and just waiting for it to
clear up some more.
Yeah. So no one knows, exactly like Canada.
Yeah.
No one knows. They're just going with the flow, unfortunately. But
yeah, and so like for us, it's like at least your strategy is sort of more regionalized. I think Scouts Canada is basically pushing ahead with a national strategy, which is fine in some respects, right? But it certainly doesn't take into account the fact that some parts of Canada are very minimally affected by the pandemic right now, right? They've
Yeah.
weathered it extremely well, and there are very minimal cases in some areas, and in other areas, of course, there are many cases. They're basically catering to the many case situation,
Yeah. Yeah.
treating that as the national situation, and that's fine. But it kind of sucks for scout groups in the Maritimes who probably legitimately could get back to in-person activities now for how low the case counts are on some of the in some of those provinces,
Yeah.
but they can't. So that was the other subject is like just getting back to it, and yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of the logistical hurdles that will come to play because there are additional risk assessments, and you do have to have sanitation measures accounted
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
in risk assessments and all of this other stuff. And yeah, whether it's are our troops going to want to even pursue that, um, or just say it's a little too much effort and we're going to sit this one out for a few months more. So we'll see. The third subject is, I guess broadly speaking, it's youth protection, and it was spurred on as an idea in my mind because I just, this was a couple of months ago now, but and I will disclaim that this person never, to my knowledge, harmed any member of my scout troop. But there was one year where we had this one person who came on board as a scouter who was just he seemed a little off. And since then, he's been in and out of jail on multiple attempts to seduce young boys. And unfortunately, he has now been released back into the area on his own recognizance, although he is thought likely to reoffend. And so it's kind of just like, I kind of, because I have, because I remember this guy being my scouter for a year,
Mhm.
there's sort of there's a deeply personal aspect to it. And I know that, I myself have found that, I mean, it's never fun to be interviewing a new scouter and have to ask the awkward questions about whether they have any history along those lines, criminal charges or complaints against them or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, it's you know it's certainly not fun to sit and digest the training material pertaining to that,
Mhm.
but I can point to a very real example out of my own life as to why this stuff is important.
Yeah. I think we've all got those stories. Unfortunately, it's sad to say, but yeah, if you've been in scouting for some time,
Mhm.
you're gonna get, yeah. It's
Yeah,
just what
and I
it.
mean, like there's been stories out of like Scouting Ireland. They had the investigation recently into their history, their records. Scouts BSA, of course, is still, for the time being, under bankruptcy protection in the U.S.,
Yeah.
ahead of having to deal with numerous claims against them. Scouts Canada has not really come under the gun as heavily as, say, those organizations. But
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, you can find these stories just
Everywhere.
about anywhere. And we haven't really touched too much on youth protection as a topic space with the podcast.
Yeah.
So that is a conversation that's going to have to be had at some point. But like I say, I don't know if I want to go heavy or light for the next episode.
It's a deep one, isn't it? That one.
Yeah.
It's a deep conversation. No, but yeah, I think it's one of those topics that should be discussed. But yeah, is it the right time?
Yeah. Well, is it ever? But that's the
No,
question.
no, no. It's a very, very good time. That's very true,
Mm.
Ken.
This
No,
might be the first time I have to put a little disclaimer out in front of the episode saying, you know what? I know some of you listen with your beavers, and that's great, but maybe skip this one.
yeah, yeah. Who plays the music in your intro, by the way?
Okay, so the very first few episodes, that was a song called Galazur, but of course that's licensed music, and I don't want to keep relying on fair use, so I dropped the use of that one. And right now, I use the artist is called Kevin MacLeod, and if you know much about like the free and unlicensed music scene, MacLeod is everywhere.
Yep.
Because he just produces a lot of tracks that he then releases for people to use. And so that particular one is called Slow Burn.
I like it. It's a good guitar riff. You know, it's good.
It is, and that's kind of why I went with it. Like, I mean, the reason I went with Galazor in the first place was because that's just an amazing guitar piece, and no vocals. It's just like fun guitar. And so after trolling through Free Music Archive for way too long, I finally found Slow Burn, and I'm like, okay, that one's not bad. I could use that. That's a good replacement.
So, Scalaken, one question before we wrap this up. I know you've got to get back to work. What do you call this?
I call that a necker.
Oh, is it as controversial in Canada as well?
I've never known it to be particularly controversial at all.
Because some people it's called a scarf, and some people call it a necker, and there's a massive divide. It's
no, we use those terms interchangeably. Scarf, necker, neckerchief. There doesn't really seem to be much controversy about it at all. But Canada's weird like that. I mean, heck, we don't even get controversial about the metric and about metric versus imperial. We use them both.
It's nice. It's straightforward here. It's nice, straightforward. No, it's cool. Okay, it's been great to talk to you. And just tell everyone about your podcast, where we can get it from, and website.
Right. So Scouting Stuff is, you can find it at scoutingstuffpodcast.com. Obviously, we are hosted through Podbean, but you can find us on pretty much any podcasting service of your choice. We're even on Spotify now. Someone pointed out that I wasn't on Spotify, so I dealt with that a little while back. Twitter.com/SSYSK podcast, because you only get 15 characters for a handle there. At Facebook and Instagram, it's just Scouting Stuff Podcast. There's a few other bits of social media that we're part of. But the easiest thing is go to scoutingstuffpodcast.com and just visit any of our episodes. Just go into any of the episodes. There'll be a set of links at the bottom if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to hit us up on Discord. If you join us on Discord, you can always, chat with us there. You can even lurk our recordings when we have them, or take part in them if you really feel like it. And other little bits of social media as well.
Excellent, cool. And people can contact you for a bit of a shout out and get their group mention on their podcast. Everyone loves a little mention, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Facebook Messenger seems to be the most popular for that. I think I get more messages by that means than any other. But yeah, I mean, at the end of every episode, we always go through the list of different ways you can contact us, and I'm always happy to receive correspondence. And yeah, that usually does end up with a shout out and an on-air response,
and a bit of a story as well. If someone's got a nice little story.
Definitely.
Excellent, cool. Well, Scouter Ken, thank you very much for joining us. I wish you all the best.
Really, thank you, Mark.
Happening, and we will speak very soon. Cool.
All right, take care.
Excellent.